searching for a lost sister. Anne is a little girl with long hair and big, beautiful eyes. She loves playing with her friends in the garden, making a banana cake, watching movies with her mother, and chasing after butterflies in summer. But most of all, she loves helping others. Even though Anne is small, she is brave and courageous. She never hesitates to help someone who is in trouble. One night, Anne was sleeping in her bed. As usual, her mother had just turned off the light after reading Anne a bedtime story. When her mother left, Anne hugged the teddy bear that she'd had since she was born and prepared to sleep and fly away to dreamland. But suddenly, she heard a faint voice of someone calling, "Hello? Hello?" It sounded like the voice of a little boy, just about Anne's age. He sounded confused and a bit scared. Anne immediately got up from her bed and looked out of the window. Even though it was night, the moon was shining bright, and the stars looked like little diamond dots. Anne saw the little boy standing shyly. His eyes looked wet. Anne realized that the boy had been crying. "Hello," Anne greeted and waved. The boy looked up and saw Anne. Hope sparked in his eyes, and he smiled. The boy looked a bit younger than Anne. His cheeks were flushed, and his curly hair shone a golden brown. Anne saw his bright eyes under the moonlight. "Can you help me?" the boy asked. "A fairy stole my little sister away." He looked so sad. His big eyes filled again with tears. "Of course I will help you," said Anne. Her room was on the first floor, so Anne simply opened the window and crawled out through it, even though this can be very dangerous and is a very bad idea. But in a minute, she was standing in front of the boy. "My name is Anne," she said, and offered a handshake. "I'm Jake," said the boy, and shook her hand. Anne knew that it was late, and she shouldn't have left home without telling her mother. But she was pretty sure that, after she explained everything, her mother would understand. Anne had already decided to help the boy. She couldn't just leave him alone now. "The fairy took my sister, and they went this way," said Jake, and pointed to the woods. "Let's go and find your sister," said Anne, and she held Jake's hand. The moon and stars lighted their way. Also, yellow fireflies gathered around Anne and Jake. They followed the kids and brightened their small faces. Suddenly, they saw a little white dog running toward them. The dog wagged its tail and smiled. Anne kneeled down and patted the dog. "Hello, beautiful dog. What's your name?" The dog didn't have a collar. It seemed that she was all alone. "Let's call you Lola. What do you think?" The dog wagged her tail eagerly. She liked her new name. "Will you come with us, Lola?" asked Anne, and Lola nodded. They continued walking together. In a few minutes, they stepped into the woods. The woods didn't look scary. Instead, it was very beautiful. Anne and her friend heard some new sounds, this time of people. They kept on walking and soon found themselves in a new place. It was as if the woods had simply disappeared. Everything was lit up as if it was morning, and people walked around. Anne noticed there was something unique about these people. All of them wore very colorful clothes. And then Anne realized they actually wore flowers instead of clothes. Their bodies were covered with various beautiful flowers of all kinds of colors: red, blue, green, yellow, purple, lilac, but Anne couldn't name them. The flowers were blossoming and the vivid colors were all mixed together. She looked around and noticed that not only people, but everything was covered with stunning flowers. The houses were built with flowers. There were flower carpets on the streets. Girls held flower bags, and boys wore flower hats. Anne's senses were almost overwhelmed. She had never seen anything so beautiful. Anne thought that this place must have been the paradise everyone was talking about. Her 3 friends were frozen from this beauty, which struck them as fresh and most unusual. Suddenly, a lady, of course in a flowered dress, tapped Anne on the shoulder. "You look so tired, kids. Come on, I'll make you some food." The lady opened a cafe door, and the 3 friends sat down at a table. Anne was looking around and couldn't believe her eyes. In just a few minutes, the lady reappeared with plates in her hands. "Now eat up," said the lady, and put the plates in front of them. Guess what? There was no food on the plate. There were only flowers. Anne, Jake, and Lola looked at each other with confused faces. But then Anne smelled the flowers, and the delicious scent teased at her nose. She was so hungry she couldn't wait any longer, and Anne tasted the red flower, which looked like a cherry on ice cream. "It's so tasty," Anne said. The flower food was so delicious, Anne's plate was clean in just 2 minutes. Jake and Lola ate the flowers too, and now they were dozing off. Anne felt her eyes closing too. Before they dropped off to sleep, Anne thanked the lady and asked her if she knew where the fairies lived. "If you want to find fairies, you have to follow this path." The lady pointed at the path, which was disappearing into the darkness. As soon as these words reached their ears, Anne and her 2 friends fell fast asleep. They woke up later in the woods, but it was early morning. It was still like nighttime, and the moon shone as bright as before. Anne couldn't see the flower town anymore. It had vanished. "Where are the flowers?" asked Jake. Anne didn't know. She shook her head, but then she noticed the path the flower lady had shown them. Anne thought, you couldn't really call it a path. It was little more than a line of stones. It looked like someone had created the path so as not to forget the way home. Anne realized that the flower town was not just a dream. The 3 friends started walking down the path. "The flower town was so strange, right? But so pretty," said Anne while they were walking. Jake nodded his head, and Lola barked too. They were all thinking the same thing. After a few hours of walking, Anne began to hear the sound of a piano. It was a beautiful melody, and Anne felt like the melody was inviting her to listen closely. "Can you hear the sound?" she asked. "Yes, I can hear it too," said Jake. They all followed the beautiful melody and saw a white house. It was the only thing standing on the bare field. Nothing else was around it. The house looked like a church, but Anne wasn't sure. The windows had colorful window glass. Anne remembered what her mother called them, mosaic. Some others call them stained glass windows. The walls were completely white. They looked freshly painted, and the rooftop was wooden. The piano sounds were coming out from a slightly opened door. Anne, Jake, and Lola peeked in. A man was playing on the piano, and little kids who sat at tables listened to him. The man had a big mustache. He wore a long hat, and layers of his favorite white shirt were up to his chin. Anne had seen people dressed like him on TV when her mother said that she was watching a film about the old days. There were no light bulbs in the room. Instead, it was lit with candles. The tall candles stood in every corner. The man noticed the three friends quietly slipping into the room, and he stopped playing the piano. "Come in. Everyone's welcome here." He stood up and spread his hands. The man had a warm smile on his face. As soon as the kids saw Lola, they ran to her and started hugging, kissing, and petting her. The kids loved Lola's soft and shiny fur. Their laughter filled the room. "Okay, kids, that's enough. Let them in," said the man, and fully opened the door. Anne, Jake, and Lola went in. The kids scooched over so the three visitors could sit next to them. "So, what brought you here?" "We're looking for my little sister. A fairy stole her from me," said Jake. His face was very sad. Anne knew how much Jake missed his little sister. "Oh, the fairies. I know them. We all know fairies," said the man, and the kids nodded their heads. The man continued, "They live in high towers and have very long silver hair. They used to sing very cheerful songs, but lately their songs are very sorrowful." Anne didn't understand the word sorrowful, but she realized it wasn't a good thing. "If you want to see them, you have to go this way," said the man, and pointed right. Anne and her friends prepared to leave, but the man said, "Listen to the sound of our piano before you go. It will make you stronger," and he started playing again. Children moved their heads to the rhythm of the melody. Anne listened to the song, and she felt her tiredness fading away. Jake and Lola looked livelier too. The melody was beautiful and sounded like a lullaby. When the man finished playing, the three friends thanked him and left to continue their journey. While walking, Anne was thinking about all the wonderful things she had seen. It was like a dream, but even better. Suddenly, Anne noticed a silver string on the ground. The string was glimmering and reflected the sunlight. Suddenly, Anne noticed a silver string on the ground. The string was glimmering and reflected the sunlight. The silver string looked so long, as if it had no end. They followed the string. Anne's intuition told her that it would lead them to the town of white fairies. She wasn't mistaken. Anne and her friends soon found themselves surrounded by fairies. As the piano man had said, the fairies had long silver hair, and their town was filled with high towers. They were built with white bricks and were so high they disappeared into the sky. As much as Anne tried, she couldn't see the rooftops. The fairies didn't walk. They floated in the air. Their bodies were almost see-through, and they had very long silver eyelashes. Anne thought that the fairies looked too beautiful to be evil. Suddenly, Jake shouted, There's my sister!" He pointed at the direction where a little girl was sitting on the ground and playing with a toy. Her round cheeks were flushed, and she was smiling. Little teeth showed from her slightly open mouth. The girl had big blue eyes and brown hair, just like Jake. Her white skin looked beautiful against the pink dress. Anne thought she was one of the cutest babies she had ever seen. But then she remembered other kids and realized that every child is beautiful in their own special way. Every single one of them. One white fairy was standing beside the playing baby and guarding her. She stood with folded arms and straightened back. The white fairy stood like she was ready to fight with anyone who tried to take the baby away from her. Anne was thinking what to do next when Jake ran to his sister. "Olivia, Olivia, I'm here, I'll take you home," he was crying while rushing to the baby. But suddenly the white fairy that was guarding Olivia turned around. She grabbed Jake's arm and flew up in the air. Jake screamed from fear. They were already a few feet up from the ground, and if Jake fell, he would break his leg. All this happened in the blink of an eye. When Anne realized what was happening, she ran to the fairy, but it was too late. They were already up in the air. "Leave my baby or I will let your hand go," the fairy was telling Jake. "She's not your baby. Olivia is my sister." "What? She is my daughter." The fairy was getting angrier and flying higher. "White fairy," Anne called, "the kind man told us that you don't sing happy songs anymore. You sing sad songs. I can see that something happened to you, and I want to talk to you. I know you don't want to hurt that little boy. You don't want to hurt anyone. You are kind and beautiful. Your heart and soul are beautiful. Even if you want to look evil, I can see the kindness in your eyes, and I can feel it too." Anne's words were genuine. She was honest. Anne had never known how to lie. While listening to Anne's words, the anger slowly disappeared from the white fairy's face. She gently landed back on the ground with Jake. As soon as Jake stepped on the ground, he ran and hugged his sister. Little Olivia recognized her brother and spread her arms. Jake lifted her up and Olivia hugged him. She was clinging onto her brother with his tiny palms. Anne saw this and calmed down. She was very happy that Jake and his baby sister were safe now that they'd found each other. Anne was looking at them with sweet eyes when she heard crying. It was the white fairy. She was crying about losing Olivia. Anne hugged the fairy and asked what had happened to her. "I had a baby girl, but someone took her away from me. I searched everywhere for her for years, but I couldn't find her. My baby is just like Olivia, small and lovely. So I took her instead for my baby girl. I thought if I had her, the sadness would go away. But it didn't. I can never replace my child. She is my one and only daughter." The fairy began to sob. Tears ran down her cheeks. Her silver eyelashes were wet. Anne hugged the fairy again. "I will help you find your daughter. I promise I will come back and we will find your baby. You will get your daughter back," said Anne. Anne didn't doubt anything she had just told the fairy. The fairy smiled and caressed Anne on the head. "I'm thankful. I'm truly grateful," said the white fairy, and she began to dry her tears. On the way back home, they followed the line of stones that led them into the woods. Jake was talking to little Olivia. Olivia listened to her brother with a serious face, as if she understood everything. Lola barked happily. "If anyone comes in our room and tries to take you, call me, okay, Olivia? Never follow them quietly again," Jake was telling his baby sister. "And you can always count on me," said Anne. She walked next to her friends until they got home. Anne realized it was time to say goodbye. She felt a bit like crying, but she didn't want to make Jake and Olivia sad. So instead, she smiled. After all, Anne could visit her friends anytime. "You will stay with us, right, Lola?" Jake asked the dog. Lola happily wagged her tail. Now she would have a home and a sweet family. Jake turned to Anne. "Anne, thank you again. We could have never found my little sister without you," said Jake, and he hugged Anne. Olivia and Lola hugged her too. 4 friends were hugging each other so tightly that you could see they didn't want to let go. Anne knew this kind of friendship was rare and that she should always cherish good friendships. Anne promised herself that she would never forget Jake, Olivia, and little Lola. They had already become part of Anne's life, and Anne a part of theirs. After a few hours, Anne crawled back into her bedroom through the window. The sun was slowly rising, and the lights flickered on the green branches. This whole adventure had happened all during the same night. Anne laid down in her bed and hugged her teddy bear. While she was drifting off to sleep, Anne was already thinking about going back into the woods to help the white fairy. The end.